Hello and welcome to WTO Forum. Today's topic, the global food crisis. What is the role of trade in bringing this crisis on, and how can trade alleviate the problem of the rapid escalation in global food prices today? We're very fortunate to have with us two experts, Olivier De Schutter, who is the Special UN Rapporteur on the Right for Food, and Christian Häberli, who is a researcher at the World Trade Institute. Gentlemen, welcome.
Welcome, thanks.
Olivier, could we start with you, please? Your thoughts on how trade may have contributed to this problem and how it may be part of the solution.
Well, I think the complexity of the problem results from the fact that high prices are a problem for the urban poor, for indeed many food producers who are net food buyers. But high prices also may be an opportunity because part of the reason why this crisis has been arriving and has been so brutal is because farmers simply could not live from farming because of very low prices since 25 years. And these low prices are a result of trade which is distorted in favor of industrialized countries' farmers and very heavily subsidized, supported by the governments against whom developing countries could not compete. Is trade a solution? Is improvement of the trade regime a solution? Well, frankly, this depends. The problem is that hunger in the world is not simply the result of too little food being available. It's not simply a question of too little food being produced, too little volume of food being produced. The real challenge is to ensure that the food which is available is affordable by those who are hungry, and the challenge is to have a sufficient purchasing power for those who are for the moment food insecure. In this respect, I think that an approach based on the human right to food can oblige us to look at what the real questions are, which sometimes the rhetorics on free trade may obfuscate. There are three arguments in general which are put forward to say that free trade contributes to food security. First, free trade ensures that food will travel from places where there are surpluses, from regions which are food deficient and where there are food deficits. In fact, food travels not to all demand, but to solvent demand, to populations which have the purchasing power which make it possible for them to afford the food. And for example, there is a large country, India, which has a very important trade surplus in food, which is 2.4 billion US dollars worth, but there are 231 million people who are hungry in India. A second argument which is put forward to say that free trade will promote food security is that, of course, free trade promotes allocative efficiency by incentivizing all countries to specialize in whichever goods or services they have a comparative advantage for. Now, the problem is that from the point of view of the human right to food, we don't only need to produce more in the most efficient way. We also need to ensure that whichever changes benefit those who are hungry, in particular, in this case, poor farmers, smallholders, who are the majority of the hungry in the world today. And so I would suggest that any changes in the trade regime which would be detrimental to this category of the population may in fact worsen the problem of food security rather than alleviate it. And then there's a third argument in favor of the idea that free trade promotes food security. And that third argument is that free trade promotes economic growth, therefore alleviates poverty and improves the incomes of those who are hungry. This would, of course, make it possible for them to afford the food which is available on the markets. This remains an open question. Certain economists consider that free trade may in fact not always be poverty alleviating and expand inequalities rather than reducing them. And so it's really an empirical question whether this round of negotiations will lead to more food security rather than worsen the existing situation of hunger in the world.
Christian.
Well, obviously trade rules cannot solve the crisis, but trade rules can contribute to perhaps improve food security in the future. Now, what do we have? We are at a turning point in the Doha round. We have to say it's rather bad, and I don't want to think it can fail. It's because the consequences for global governance would be disastrous, just something like the mortgage crisis in the United States. I come to the conclusion that what we have on the table from the Doha round is a big step forward, just from a purely food security viewpoint. But at the same time, it also represents 5 steps back. The good news is that yes, tariffs will go down, subsidies will go down, and that will make a big contribution to shifting to production to where it is really needed and where the poor farmers in developing countries have now a way to compete which they had not had before. The bad news is that we have those subjects like export bans and restrictions and taxes. Governments have taken to that very quickly when the food crisis broke out, which is perhaps a normal reaction for a minister in need of re-election. But the World Bank has pointed that out in a study. It increases food insecurity, and it does not even reduce food prices at home. Second point is the fact that under the new proposals, virtually all the food aid is going to be placed under what is called a safe box, meaning it will escape any kind of control under the export competition, what is called the export subsidy. And I'm talking here of non-genuine food aid, which has, as a matter of fact, the role of surplus disposal and of market displacement. And there is thirdly, no real commitment to maintain food aid levels when commodity prices are rising. And this is particularly shocking when you see this graph from the World Food Programme, which shows clearly that in 2007, these are wheat prices reached a record high level, and the food aid went to a record level at the minimum. So this is the same in maize, it is the same in other commodities. So there should be also a correcting decision taken at the Doha round. Fourthly, we had for decades have rich countries subsidizing food, not only in their markets but also in the world markets, depressing world markets and preventing poor producers responding to now increasing prices. The supply of those people is not sufficient. They cannot respond to the new price situation. And these same rich countries under the Doha round proposals can continue focusing their price support on such staple food commodities being eaten in other countries, and they can, for instance, turn them into ethanol for the biofuels. And that is, of course, not something which will increase, but it will decrease food security. Lastly, there is in all the rounds, there are some losers, and there should be a compensation package by a base of aid for trade for those who will have to make double efforts to catch up with the winners of the Doha round. So I know WTO is first and foremost about trade liberalization, and like it or not, it's not a development organization. It's not nothing about food security really or directly. But if this is called the Doha development agenda, it should at least avoid collateral damage to those food insecure countries and populations. Negotiators now, I think, have a time to take a fresh look at the proposals on the table.
A fairly stark assessment, Olivier. Do you share Christian's views there?
Well, I share Christian's views. I think there is one question which remains open, though, which is the positive point he began with. Will farmers from developing countries be able to benefit from better market access, the elimination of export subsidies, and the very strong limitations imposed on domestic support schemes? This is an open question, and it will depend on the situation of producers in each country. It's clear that producers from Brazil, India, China will benefit from these market openings. It's equally clear that many farmers are simply not connected to the markets, will not in fact benefit from whichever less distorting trade regime follows the conclusion of the Doha round of negotiations, because in many regions in sub-Saharan Africa and in certain regions of South Asia, there is no infrastructure available for them. They have no access to credit. They have very few access to technology, and they are simply not in a position to benefit. So the Doha round might be beneficial if the public policies were there, and if the money was there, the public money was there, for these investments in agriculture to happen, in order for agriculture to be revived, since it's been basically destroyed by 25 years of distorted trade in agriculture. This is not a matter for the WTO itself. It's a matter for official development assistance. It's a matter for the public budgets of the states concerned. But I'm skeptical that for the moment, the conditions are fulfilled for smallhold farmers in developing countries to always benefit from more trade openings.
This is interesting, because just the 3 countries you have mentioned are the ones you have said. In India, 230 million hungry people. China has 150 million hungry people. Brazil has hungry people. And they are going to benefit from new trade openings, and therefore it is a national responsibility. Food security starts at home, and these governments are then be held to task for improving food security for the poor in their own countries. The other ones in smaller countries, African and others, also in Asia, I fully agree with you. What is needed is a comprehensive package. Now, unfortunately, investments have gone down in agriculture because it was so for a long time a neglected sector of the economy, no future in agriculture. Research and development has gone down, extension services have gone down. Now, if you want to speak about smallholders, and that's the large majority, especially in Asia, smallholding, landless farmers, this is a different type of technology than what you need to help these people with a new, perhaps a new green revolution, or gene revolution, somebody has said. And this is something where a comprehensive package is needed, and this goes far beyond WTO, but the commitment must be taken. If the markets go open up, commitment has to be taken by the world community.
Olivier, your final thoughts.
Well, I think the real question is whether this may happen, and what the impact shall be respectively on the large agricultural producers on one hand and smallholders on the other hand of trade opening. The farming sector is increasingly dualized, with 0.5% of the farms of 100 hectares or more, very large producers, which have access to political influence, to export markets, to technologies, to credit. And then you have 85% of the farmers in the world who live on 2 hectares or less per land. 2 billion people, 500 million households live on very small portions of land to make a living. Those need to be helped. And if more trade means more marginalization of those smallholders, then it will be a very serious failure.
Christian, you have the last word.
I say let's use the lapse in Doha for getting together a comprehensive package, getting together the actors at the governmental, intergovernmental scene for global governance, and the operators, all stakeholders involved in food production, processing, bringing it to the people, and letting the people have the food at all times nutritious as the FAO's Food Summit has defined it.
Christian Häberli, Olivier De Schutter, many thanks to you both, and many thanks to you for watching WTO Forum.